And her response was, it's going to be like pushing on an open door. So some people talk about journey and they really mean a process map with no customer, reflected in it. Some people talk about a journey and they're talking about a service blueprint. And then some people are talking about a journey and they're talking about it, a deep dive into a particular phase within the end-to-end journey. We absolutely leverage AI. And that's been something obviously in the last year too, that we've started to get really comfortable with. And it's a tremendous accelerator in being able to help understand and do some of the foundational insight gathering. But I do think that co-design, thinking of my business leaders and stakeholders as my customers, and treating them like I would treat any experience improvement, transformation with the end customer, I think is the most effective way to be successful. The way that you need to structure your CX program should be done with.
So most CX leaders that get into the position of leading CX for the first time in a large corporate are set up for failure. They are the puppeteers of the board, and they are put in place to become customer-centric. And lo and behold, after 1 or maybe 2 years, their impact is low. They've built out VOC programs, they tried their best, but they can't quantify their results. And as a result of that, the programs get scrapped, the business goes back to square one, and they try again. And the second time, then it takes off. But that's not Angie. Angie was actually put in place at HSB as the first person to lead CX, and she's done a phenomenal job. And in this conversation, we're going to dig into how she did it, what made her successful against the pattern of first-time CX leaders stepping into a new role and building this up. And we're digging into team structure, using the way of building traditional insurance products and using a VOC approach to tying financial results to customer insights to help the business move forward. And she has a unique take on bringing all these perspectives together. She offers frameworks, she offers perspective, and above all, a lot of examples on how you can do it as well. This is my conversation with Angie. My guest today is Angelique Wyszynski, as everyone calls her Angie. She's the global head of insurance innovation and CX at HSB, Hartford Steam Boiler. And she's someone who's been shaping customer experience long before it even had a label. Over 2 decades in some of the toughest, most risk-averse industries out there. And you can imagine who those are, insurance and finance. She started out in strategy marketing at Travelers, went out to build one of the most comprehensive voice of the customer programs in the insurance industry at the Hartford. And today she's leading research, innovation, and CX transformation at HSB. And she has this rare mix of behavioral economics, deep industry know-how, and a passion for making organizations truly customer-oriented. So, Angie, I'm so glad you can join me today.
I'm so happy to be here.
So 20 years of customer experience building, even before it had a name. It's all about understanding people, right? Not just understanding your customers, but, and we're going to talk a lot about that today, understanding what makes people tick inside large legacy organizations. And maybe we can start there. I mean, you've been at HSB for 4 years.
Yep, approaching 4 years.
Do you remember what were the signals that told you way back when, 4 years is a long time, that the organization was ready or maybe not ready for customer-centric transformation?
Yeah, I think one of probably the clearest signal is that they had never had any CX function or role at the organization. And we're over 150-year-old, as you mentioned, insurance company. The fact that they had created this dedicated CX role and it reported into the C-suite and part of the C-suite that actually owned and had responsibility for global product ownership, which is central to our business, was the first sign of the emphasis that they put on this and their appetite for CX transformation. The second would be that the position itself had a pretty wide mandate. There weren't carved out guardrails in terms of where I needed to focus my energy. And so they had deference to my background and expertise to help shape the position to what it needed to be to help transform the business. And so I recall back in my interview, I spent a little bit of time talking to my leader right now, saying that, for the past decade plus, I had spent most of my time selling into the organization the value and the importance of CX. And I asked her if it was going to be much of the same at this organization. Her response was, it's going to be like pushing on an open door. So just to hear from leadership that this was an opportunity to really infuse customer centricity and customer experience into a longstanding organization, and you mentioned it in the very beginning, highly regulated, risk-averse, was a good signal that they were ready to take on some change.
I've had a couple other chief experience officers and CX leaders on the show, and the common theme there is that they say the first person to lead CX in an organization that never had CX leadership is almost setting himself, herself up for failure, right? They'll probably do their best, great strategy, implementation, and after 1 or 2 years, they get fired or reorganized and basically doesn't get the traction that was intended. It seems like you didn't had that experience.
Not yet, and hopefully never.
Right. Well, what is different? What is different in your case, you think? What is the anomaly here that breaks this pattern?
Well, I think it kind of ties into the way that you need to structure your CX program should be done with always your business partners and your stakeholders and the organization in mind. And what I mean by that is I think there's kind of two different ways that people can approach leading CX in any organization. One can be that you come in with all the discipline and skill set and you lay out, here's what needs to happen, and in this order of operations, and here are the resources I need. And the other is that you spend time really understanding and engaging with leaders, with management, with frontline to understand what's driving the business, where the gaps are, what are their priorities and goals, and then attaching yourself to helping support and, steward the achievement of those goals. So it's kind of like nobody wants to hear their baby's ugly is a phrase that I've heard people say before. So coming in and pointing out everything that's wrong or needs to change, while it may be true, is not going to get you the traction or the credibility that building relationships and attaching yourself to business outcomes that are rooted within the organization already. And so that's where I think I had an opportunity to build what we have today and where we've had a lot of success. So early in my days at HSB, I spent probably the first 3 months of my time just engaging in a CX diagnostic. So I went around to over 45 different leaders at varying levels throughout the organization and interviewed them and assessed across 12 different dimensions of customer experience maturity where we were from their perspective. And I synthesized that information. I reported it out to the leadership team throughout that process. And what that did is it helped to inform, the order of operations and what we needed to build. But it also was designed by them. If you think about it, it wasn't me that was designing it. It was them telling me where the gaps were, where they thought there was a need. And then me taking that information and then using it to shape what we now have as an organization. So I do think that co-design, thinking of my business leaders and stakeholders as my customers and treating them like I would treat any experience improvement transformation with the end customer, I think is the most effective way to be successful.
Right. So it's almost like you start bridging silos, starting to create bridges between those people from day one, rather than say like CX is my turf, here's my way, here's an approach, and basically creating yet another silo for CX, which maybe is the pattern that I'm seeing in other organizations. So that's one thing. And then when you're interviewing them on 12 dimensions, like what would be some of the examples that stood out?
Yeah. So a couple of the different examples were, did we have a clear definition of who our customer was? So our business is really complex. We are B2B to B2C in some instances. We have quite a few different distribution models. And so depending on who you're talking to in the organization, there's a different customer. Another would be, what our vision was. Do we have a vision for what we want to deliver and the experience that we want to ensure our customers have at every interaction? who has responsibility for it, or what was the perspective of who should own customer experience. The financial reporting coming alongside VOC was another dimension. The way that we responded to improvement opportunities, was it driven by a crisis, or was it something that we were proactive in instituting improvements as a result of things that we were observing in the marketplace or things that our customers needed? So there was a host of different ways that we kind of probed into it. It was conversational, but we did document and really produce something that was both, I guess, a little bit of subjectivity because it was from the voice of stakeholders, and there was other dimensions that were quantifiable. But ultimately, like I mentioned before, it really was essential that the business stakeholders' voice was reflected in our agenda and what the mandate was going forward.
Oh, I love that. It sounds so messy to do this from all these different perspectives, types of customers, product lines, priorities. Well, what was it you ultimately landed on? Was there something that unified everyone and everything, or was it more like a language that the different business units, whether it was like a distribution model, direct to consumer, or like through partners, like what was the connective tissue that you landed on, if there was any?
There was, and I will tell you because it was kind of the seeds of what is now my organization. So if you think about insights transcend all customers. They transcend product development. They transcend operational practices. And so one of the things that was universally heard in those interviews was that we lacked a dedicated or expert disciplined research function. And so that might sound like a little bit counter to what traditional CX organizations are structured as. But from my experience, it actually was the right path to go down, because it gave us an opportunity to start demonstrating early the impact that we could have under the umbrella of CX, but truly with disciplined research resources within our shop. And that was something that was both a need that the organization had. And if you think about, in the absence of having a dedicated team, there's a lot of expense that comes into going externally to engage vendors and partners to perform and quantify opportunity areas and perform research on your behalf. And so that was a quick win, and something that was universally shared across all of the different stakeholders that I connected with. And so as a result of that, that was the earliest opportunity. That's how I started formulating my team. First two people that I brought into the organization were research practitioners from a secondary research and a primary research. So we had complementary skills on both sides, and we deployed them to the areas of the greatest need and opportunity within the organization, and modeled what an insight-driven, outside-in approach could yield for the organization. And that's, I think, part of building credibility and modeling the way was, to your point, looking at where there was universal need and common themes, but also ensuring that we were meeting our customers or our stakeholders where they were and where they had the biggest need. So
there was a momentum, it sounds like, but how does this gain traction? Was it just like that team instantly created results for the business, everyone rallied together, and 4 years later, everything is fantastic? Like, did it take off right away? Like, how do you get traction once some initial results are showing some promise?
The incremental impact, I think it was actually a relatively easy way to grow and scale the organization, in that I had really good resources who were being deployed to the right areas. And we had a lot of just word of mouth, I think, recognition that what they were delivering was valuable. I also had the benefit of, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, my leadership team, in addition to establishing my role within her shop, also ended up taking over an innovation function that it was in a different form, but it was under a different leader. And when it came under her leadership, there was an opportunity to rethink how they were doing their work. And so innovation is so crucial to HSB. We deliver specialty products, niche products to customers. And so we constantly need to look out for the marketplace and see where there's gaps or customer problems that we can solve. And that obviously is something that is driven by insights. So if you think about the complement of my group as a research function, engaging with the innovation team to assess opportunity areas and validate some of those opportunity areas, that was really a way for us to kind of really instantiate ourselves into the day-to-day practices of the business.
Okay, a couple of things that stand out to me. So, and I want to dig into all of them if we can. So, yeah. One was earlier on, you mentioned financial reporting is coming along with VOC, but you said something else, which is interesting to me. You said, like, we focused on high quality output. And I want to understand what high quality means, because a lot of research teams, a lot of CX teams produce meaningful insight, and people look at their reports, look at their data, and they basically ignore them. High quality sounds like it was actioned. Can you define that a little bit? Like, what does it look like? What does it do? How does that come to be in practice?
So my fellow research practitioners who might listen to this podcast will probably be angry at me saying this, but I think we've all experienced where you have engaged research, and it could be within your organization or even externally, and they produce a great report and they leave it at your desk and they walk over and they do the next thing and they leave that report at their desk. Translating what the findings are into the implications and the actions and the recommendations is kind of outside of what a traditional research function does, right? And it actually took a little while for our team to get comfortable with, hey, don't be afraid of kind of saying, this is what this implies, or here's where we think the organization should go as a result of the insights, because that was kind of outside of what their traditional background kind of told them to do, right? But when I say high quality, it's doing that translation. It's sitting with the business and consulting on the implications of the findings, staying along for the ride, not just handing it over, but offering support and helping shape the next steps if they're going to take action on it. And one thing that we have as a practice within our group is whenever we deliver, on an engagement, is we're always staying connected with our business partners to understand, so how is that information used to drive either a change, an action, and a result? And so we try to capture that so we can, effectively quantify the impact of the work that we're doing in financial terms and operational savings, in mitigated, risk if we had gone down a different path, an uninformed path. So that's what I mean by high quality. Is it's thorough, it's comprehensive, and always looks nice because my team has an excellent eye for detail. But more importantly, it is socialized in a way that makes it tangible and actionable.
All right. And I think this is where so many CX teams go wrong, because they are like reporting on the usual metrics, and every month they produce the same output and they have new data, and it's super interesting and everyone ignores it. But what you're doing is going not one, but like 2, 3 steps further.
Yeah, exactly. A few steps further, for sure.
Yeah. And what is it about financial reporting coming along? Was that more like tracking the impact of the actions that your business stakeholders are taking, the new innovations they're bringing, and then tying that back? Or was it something else that you meant with financial reporting coming along?
So I think there's two things. One is whenever you're showcasing that's operational voice of customer, those day-to-day transactional inputs that you might have, if you're reporting on those types of metrics, I think it's crucial that you're always doing so alongside financials or operating metrics. It stitches together, again, going back to this theme of meeting people where they are. Those are the core metrics that an organization cares about. And so if you can present the VOC, not only does it show where there's linkages, but it brings credibility to the customer experience and the sentiment that is being expressed and how that may influence some of those other core metrics. So that's one way that I think about the financial reporting connecting with insights. The other is, part of what's really challenging for a lot of organizations in a CX function, and ours is a centralized function, we don't reside within any particular business, we serve the entire organization, is, you're disposable, right? Like centralized functions are disposable functions in many ways. They're a cost that the P&Ls incur or support. And so when I think about the financial partnership, one of the things when I think about finance is that working with them to understand what is the cost of us doing the work that we're doing and the value that we're providing relative to what it would have been had we done nothing, had we engaged with an external provider, or, if there was a different type of support structure in place. And that financial offset is also a way to quantify the impact and the investment of your organization being something that the business couldn't do without. So I think about finance as a crucial partner and a critical element in everything that we're doing.
Does that mean that for every engagement you could you were able to do this? Because for a lot of teams, this is the hard part. Sometimes you're flying blind. Your business doesn't want to do the financial analysis for you because they have other things to do, and you don't know necessarily how much of an impact you can make. So what is your strategy for making sure that you can actually tie it back to the impact you're making, so that ultimately the business sees that CX is not a cost, but it's actually driving a lot of value? So what's the strategy there?
So it's going to become a tired refrain that I'm going to say throughout this conversation, but I really bring it back to relationships. So, I have a fantastic finance partner who is just willing to roll up the sleeves and sit with us and help us understand how we can map these things, out. And it brings a level of credibility, but also it's the partnership and it's bi-directional. If there's things that we can do for finance, we do that, right? From like a market assessment, our market share, things like that. I've got folks on the team who are very skilled in being able to pull that type of data together. So that bi-directional relationship and support that we get is the result of, a great partner that I have in the organization. And prior organizations spent some time, and it was a little bit like, pushing a rock up a hill, but getting finance to help us quantify the impact of CX improvements from a metric perspective with share of book of business. So, my time at the Hartford, we did this annual relationship study with agents and brokers, and we were able to actually work with finance to say for every point of incremental improvement in our MPS, that equates to X percentage of the book of business. And we had the methodology and all the information at our disposal. And so every time that we made a recommendation that drove an improvement in the NPS, we could tick and tie it back to the financial impact. And so there's different ways that you can bring that to life. I think it depends on, what type of engagement and practice you're pursuing. But yeah, I think that the partnership with finance and other core disciplines is crucial.
Do you think organizations would still pursue tying NPS to incremental revenue gains? Is that still something we should be doing today?
I think that whatever the metric is that you're executing on, you should figure out how to tie it back to financial impact. And that could be either operational expense, it could be revenue generation. There's different ways that you can do that. But I do think that perhaps in less mature organizations, that's probably not something that's well executed. In our organization, we're not running any NPS studies per se at present. But we are doing customer satisfaction. We're looking at it by segmentation. And we know what we get from the different segments of our customers in terms of results. And so, it helps to guide the organization and where we need to place our focus to drive experience improvement because we know what the financial potential implications are going to be. So, yeah, I think it depends on the organization and their level of maturity.
Talk to me about your team. You have about 20 people in your team. Mm-hmm. Your finance partner, it sounded like that was a stakeholder in the business that connects with you, right?
Yep.
So what is your team set up today?
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting evolution. So I shared before that we started as really being focused on the research discipline. And that actually grew over time to include people with marketing expertise, digital marketing expertise to support some of the capabilities that we've put in place to democratize insights out to the organization. We have probably, I'm trying to think, I think probably half the team is really anchored in the VOC, CX, and primary and secondary research competencies, if you will. And the other half of the team is innovation architects, ideation strategists, and the like. And we've got some operational practitioners to help us understand how we can drive efficiency across our group, but also with our business partners. And so it's kind of a mixed bag, but it's actually great because we have so many different perspectives. I will tell you that one common theme across everybody in the group is that they're all truly at the core interested in driving business impact and value, right? Nobody is interested in sitting on their laurels or resting on their laurels. Everybody is execution minded, strategic thinkers, collaborative partners, which are some of the key criteria that I always look for when I'm bringing on people is, do they have a student mentality? Are they interested in collaborating and engaging? And do they appreciate that things don't happen overnight and that's going to take some time and work to be able to, instantiate ourselves as core to the business, which everybody has stuck around. And we're a fantastic group. They're incredible people.
And when you're just 20, serving such a large organization, you always are the bottleneck, right? There's always more requests than you can handle. You are seeing things that other business units are not seeing and you want to pursue. So how do you make those trade-offs? Like, what goes into prioritization? Is it an art? Is it a science? Do you have like standard operating procedure? And it's like, okay, here's how we're actually prioritizing. Like, what goes into defining the things you do pursue versus you don't?
Yeah. So let me kind of zoom out a little bit. There's three different ways that our capacity is devoted to the organization. One is, the business coming to us as needed with a request. And oftentimes it's not, something that is as direct as I need research for XYZ. It's a broad challenge or, issue that they're contending with or an opportunity that they want to capitalize on. And the first way that we kind of suss out whether or not this is something we should devote our time to is by looking for alignment to the strategic priorities of the business. That's not to say that the stuff they're coming to us isn't important, but is it actually the thing that is going to help move the needle in terms of what the business leaders have articulated as their core priorities? And do they have sponsorship or awareness of is the business leader aware of this type of engagement? Do they think it's crucial and important? So that's one element. Not everything has a business sponsor or can be clearly linked back to a priority, but those are truly the exceptions rather than the rule. So we've developed a front end from a research practice or a CX practice where anything that comes to us, that's part of the criteria that we assess it against. The other tranche of demand is based on what is coming through our innovation funnel. So we have an incredible ideation strategist who has built, the top of the funnel where we're bringing in ideas from our business stakeholders. And those ideas oftentimes have to fall into what we call our focus areas. So our ideation strategist worked with our C-suite to identify the crucial areas or themes, if you will, of opportunity that we wanted to focus on. So think about AI or think about energy. Those would be a focus area. Ideas that come in are assessed against a rubric and scored, and that makes the determination as to whether or not they come into the next stage gate. And that next stage gate would be an area where the research team would be applied to help validate, a concept. So there's ways that we're taking things at the top and kind of narrowing the funnel. And then the third tranche is things that we are pursuing to drive transformation or change. So the business hasn't necessarily come to us, but we know it's crucial for us to put these practices in place. And so I referenced one earlier. We have built an internal portal that brings together all of the research that we have, all of the publications that we actually deliver on a monthly basis, in addition to credible news sources that are tied to the areas of focus for the organization. And we've democratized that out to, over 300 business partners who it'll be a virtuous circle who, now that they're informed, can become the seeds of innovation that will come right back into that funnel where we'll pursue something that might be a new product or a new service or a new strategy and distribution model per se. So there's kind of those three different buckets and ways that we're assessing and weeding out the things that don't really fit. But I think another piece of it is making it core to our group that we are trying to teach people to fish. So we're not trying to be the bottleneck and be the only experts who can do this type of work. Part of what our strategy entails is teaching people this, giving them the capabilities and the tools and the knowledge of how they can pursue some of these opportunities on their own without having to rely on a centralized team. So that I think is helpful in terms of helping us orchestrate our work. And we incorporate Agile into everything that we do. Everybody makes fun of me, but like we put up Kanban boards in our research team. They're like, research is using Kanban boards and Agile? Isn't that an IT process? And the answer is, you can Frankenstein it for anything. And so we've used it as a mechanism to help us understand how our work flows through to completion and how it aligns back to the business units and our strategic priorities and the impact ultimately that it has. So that's how we're figuring out how to manage our demand. There's always
I love
something
that.
to do.
It almost sounded like the second tranche was inside out, right? Business leaders coming with ideas, and then you go out and validate that. But then it
No,
sounds like
they would get kicked out early in the funnel before they even came to us if they didn't meet some of the criteria of which, what is the problem that we're solving? Is it something that we've cooked up? Are we building something and are we building a solution and trying to find a problem, or is there an actual problem that requires a solution? So shifting the way that the organization thinks about it a little bit differently.
right. And if your distribution of your insights goes to those 300 business partners and they are feeding it out, then people will generate ideas from that,
That's right.
They will see something that is relevant to them or they're working on right now or thinking about it, which will then, it's like a mini flywheel for your team to pick them up. Right?
Exactly.
So when you're thinking about innovation, you mentioned products and building them together with your business partners. Are we talking new insurance instruments or different value props? Or is it more like in the traditional or maybe like modern sense, product innovation, meaning digital innovation, digital interfaces? Like there's a big difference between the two. And what I'm seeing is that sometimes CX is supporting product organizations, especially in R&D and IT, to validate things. But in a lot of insurance and financial organizations, CX is foundational to finding a new market, to finding a new value prop. So how are those two coming to be in your organization?
Yeah, I think I was trying to touch on that a moment ago when I was describing kind of the insights that we're pushing out into the organization, because we are always scanning the marketplace to identify where there's changes, where there's new exposures, new opportunities, new services that need to be incorporated into the ecosystem. And by pushing that information out into the organization, nothing prohibits us from coming up with an idea or a new concept, but oftentimes it is our business stakeholders who are doing that. Your first part of your question, because there was a lot in there. I'm thinking through it. So your first part was asking me about traditional products. So these are insurance products. These are new insurance products that are adjacent to our core, right? So we're not talking about something that is a moonshot, but something that is an extension of, what we're already good at, right? Like our core discipline where we have a right to win. We're also partnering with our business to pursue new services. Like we talked about before, the risk mitigation platforms that people can be leveraging to help ensure that we don't have losses. And so there's pieces of that. You asked about the digital component. I think it's interesting because there's so many folks in our team who have a background in strategy development that even if it's not within our mandate as an innovation practice, in terms of digital solutions, we are getting pulled into digital strategy or business strategy development. And part of our actual mandate is about how do we think about large business initiatives, that's what we call them, which are truly strategy work. Is there a new area or new distribution that we should be pursuing that we haven't been in before, but is something that is on the horizon? So there's quite a bit of that comes through our innovation process, and it's evolved from the last few years when it was initially just truly insurance products, risk transfer, warranties, things of that nature. Now includes a far larger group of capabilities that we deploy and a much broader mandate.
Does the organization innovate without any one of you involved?
I'm sure that there's innovation that happens without us involved. I think that's probably central to kind of the core of our business. There's a great entrepreneurial spirit at HSB. I think that's really unique at this organization. And so I'm sure there's levels of innovation that happen, but with the degree of rigor that we apply and with the process discipline that we have put in place, no. Yeah.
How is the team set up as it has evolved to a team in your mind being correct? And what I mean with that is, let's put it this way: would you build it again as a centralized function, or because there's a lot of organizations where CX isn't centralized, there's obviously like a function
Federated,
and there's leadership, but it's federated, right? Or it's like distributed again in different teams, and everyone has CX folks, people, practitioners in their teams. Would you do it again, centralized?
Here, yes. And part of that is demand ebbs and flows, right, from different parts of the organization. I was explaining before that we have quite a complex organization and our like many different distribution models. And so in order for us to be agile, adaptable to demand, I think you have to be in a function that can apply your resources and deploy them in accordance with where, they're best needed. I also think that part of it has to do with what is the level of maturity or skill set that's within the business, because you can't simply just pop people in there when there is a learning curve or an appetite that has to be built. It's better served if you have a centralized function who can work and, like I said before, incrementally, you know, pursue opportunities to improve and teach people and model the way. So yeah, I would build it as a centralized function. We do now, 4 years later, have people that sit in the business. They're not part of our group, but they're very, very close business partners who have little mini kind of similar setups from an innovation practice, not entirely the same, but similar, where they're formulating ideas, they're pursuing market insights, oftentimes absent our support. So it's almost like a federated model, but not quite, in that they still come to us as kind of the last line of really applying that rigor when it comes to innovation practices and customer experience and market and customer insights as a discipline. So yeah, I think I would set it up as a centralized function again.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. What is your secret to like protecting your team's strategic focus while staying responsive to like business demands, the quick and has to happen now kind of requests?
Yeah. So one of the things that we instituted as part of kind of our intake, which I feel like that sounds so bureaucratic, but let's just call it like how our businesses come to us for support, is asking about obviously the timeline of when they need something. And oftentimes they haven't articulated what it is that they need. They've just stated kind of the problem to be solved and the audience that it is impacting. And then we ask them about critical decisions. So where in the timeline are the critical decisions that need to be made? And the reason that that's important is sometimes you can, I don't want to call it drip feed things to people, but before the full, you don't have to take this waterfall approach where you've built a 40-page report and executed months-long research. There are insights that you can provide to the business incrementally, like I keep using that word, but it's true. I think kind of feeding people the information that they need so that they can make decisions does not have to wait for this big long tail project. And so right sizing our work and the ways that we're providing the information and support to business in accordance with when they really have a need is the way that we've kind of managed that process. And that actually has been a relatively recent learning, I will say. It's probably been in the last year and a half that we've tried to shift our model from deliverable to incremental and then ultimately the deliverable. But it's proven effective in allowing us to kind of manage our capacity accordingly.
Oh, that's fascinating. Do you see a world where it's going to be on demand now that AI is taking over and there's a lot of change in the insight space in general? Like, do you see an on-demand model where our business leaders have always the complete access to the information they need and they can basically query or search or ask anything they need? Is that something that you're foreseeing will happen? Is possible? Like, how are you seeing this play out?
So it's interesting. We absolutely leverage AI. And that's been something obviously in the last year too, that we've started to get really comfortable with. And it's a tremendous accelerator in being able to help understand and do some of the foundational insight gathering. But there still is this human element. So, you think about how are people thinking, feeling, what are they doing, their actual behaviors and how they're navigating through a process. I have yet to see AI produce what a human being can produce in terms of insight probing from an emotional perspective, understanding the motivators, the ways that people make decisions. And so I think from like a qualitative, a human to human engagement, that it will take some time to replicate, but it's possible, right? And so part of what you just asked about has also been something that keeps me up sometimes, thinking about how do we need to uh, offer a suite of capabilities that again can be deployed depending on where the need is, but also as the AI or technology evolves and there's less of a demand for this type of resource or this capability, we have all these other things on the bench that we can deploy that we know are necessary. So we were talking about journey mapping not so long ago, and I've done quite a bit of that in my career, and it's always been a very highly manual intensive effort. And for me to have a capability that allows me to like plug in some information and produce what would normally take months and months and start to add context to it, that's another demonstration of where technology can be an accelerator, but there's still this human element of being able to contextualize what technology is enabling. So I do think that our business leaders will, I mean, we're trying to do that ourselves when we're deploying our capabilities out there to put things at their fingertips. They don't need to come to us. It's on demand. But there's always going to be this additional consultation or context that needs to be provided, I think, to our business partners. So
Interesting. You mentioned journey mapping. Obviously, I know a few things about journey management and AI, but what is fascinating to me is that what I'm seeing with the journey is that it's a practitioner tool, right? It's probably within your team. You have to fact check me if that's wrong, but like it's one of the ways that we are making sense of the world and understand where in the customer experience, where in the business the problems occur. But as soon as you start sharing it with the broader business, people just want the insight. There you go. Like, oh, that's a big thing. Yeah, sure. Please walk me through it. And then maybe they're engaged, but in general, they just want to know your findings. They want to know where the opportunity is. They want to know what they can do with that. Is that something you see as well? Or do you work in a unique organization where everyone loves the journeys?
I mean, I think people love the idea of the journeys that we've done in the past, like the big manual journeys. They felt like there's great visual that it has, and they refer to it all the time. But if I'm honest, I think that you're spot on in saying, and this goes back to right sizing, the deliverable to the audience. There is a lot of detail that goes into like traditional journey mapping. And you can over-engineer them to the point where they're inactionable because people can't wrap their heads around it. There's so much in there. So how do you tease out the most salient points that you want to deliver and that will get traction in the organization? It goes back to like keeping it simple, which is one of my challenges. I'm not somebody who likes to keep it simple. I like to dig into a million different angles and introduce complexity where it's probably not necessary when it comes to stuff like that. But that is a big lesson: is how do you strip it down to the things that we know are going to be impactful and can be translated into action. And so, that has been my experience as well. So part of what we're trying to do now is how do we do cheap and cheerful or light journey mapping that we know people can continue to leverage, that they will refer to and use as kind of the rubric when every time they're making changes, reflecting on what the impacts will be up and downstream. There's a lot of different ways that we can deploy journey mapping to bring organizational value. But yeah, your point about are people like, oh, that's nice and walk away? Yes, that has been my experience in many cases. And so it has to be something. If you want it to be driving actionability, that has to be something that the business has asked for and is eager to have you support and execute. If you're doing it in a vacuum, it'll be nothing but a pretty picture. So
no, you're right. What I like to think about is like the journey happens, whether you're intentional about it or not. Like your customers having that experience, they're having this engagement. We're expressing it as a journey. So also to the business, like the journey is there. They trust that the experts are understanding where the data is coming from, how it's related to the journey, where in the experience, for what type of segment or customer type we're actually seeing this problem or opportunity come through. And then we're sharing it with them. But the journey has to be there because, and that's the most interesting thing that we are finding, like an insight can be an insight, but if it happens for a new customer and an onboarding journey to a new product, can have a completely different business impact than it's for like a lifetime like a customer that's been there for 20 years, has bought multiple products, and just happens to stumble upon this frustrating thing that they complain about, and then we'll fix it and nothing happens. But if you lose a customer in their onboarding, it's probably not going to give you
completely
the
different
results.
ball game.
So journeys matter a lot, and that's the hardest challenge to overcome. Like, it has to be there for the insights to be connected to something of value.
Has to be tangible. And I think people need to see themselves in the journey. I think you were referring to this before, but one of the things that we've done is it's almost like a mirror where you have like the front stage and the backstage journey, but really aligned even the sentiment of our employees at each one of those stages within the process so that they can understand, first of all, what's happening beyond their, purview across the experience. How did their interactions of the work that they do have an impact downstream? Which customers are they touching? How are we measuring things? One of the big learnings when we painted the first picture for one of our business units was how many areas of opportunity there was to institute a mechanism to measure the interactions. And I don't even mean from like a customer sentiment perspective. I just mean from a data perspective. So there's so many ways that it can illuminate and create transparency. And to your point, understanding how is this affecting one segment versus another? Is it having an outsized impact on certain demographic or certain personas or, any of those things, a new customer versus a legacy customer? So there's a lot of that can be layered in. But I think again, starting from simple and then expanding upon it, when people have understood the language, they're speaking the language, they understand the implications, is crucial to make sure that it has, staying power.
Do you find that whatever meeting you are in, when people talk about the journey or a journey, that they talk about the same thing? They have the same level of abstraction in mind. They understand it's like talking about the end-to-end experience, talking about a very like micro journey. Like, do you have a sense that is well covered in your organization?
I think that the taxonomy of journey is all over the place. So some people talk about journey and they really mean a process map with no customer, reflected in it. Some people talk about a journey and they're talking about a service blueprint. And then some people are talking about a journey and they're talking about it, a deep dive into a particular phase within the end-to-end journey. So aligning around the taxonomy is also something that I think, words matter. I always tell people. And so defining what are we actually saying and what does that mean? And that's important because if you assume that everybody's speaking the same language, and I've had this happen in a previous role where people would say, oh, we've mapped the journey. Okay, great. Can you send me, what you guys have created? And again, it would be a process map. And so you can make assumptions and draw the wrong conclusions unless you clarify and start building a common taxonomy or lexicon around customer experience and the different capabilities. And that's important to get people aligned.
Is there something like a shared journey framework or an atlas where people know, like, when I'm talking about this journey, I can look there, it's accurate, it's up to date, has data, everything is there for me? Or is that not relevant? And again, they trust you to be the guardian of like the truth.
Yeah, I think it's relevant. We don't have anything exactly like that today. The last journey maps that we did, again, were done, a lot of hand manual effort to pull them together. And so part of what we endeavored to do was ensure that it was an organic instrument that was constantly updated to reflect changes that we were implementing within the business. Insurance doesn't move that quickly. So a lot of, there might be some changes that you're implementing, but in reality, even a journey map that's perhaps a year and a half old is going to be 80% the same if you're looking, with the exception of maybe customer experience sentiment and things of that nature, if you've changed the way that you're engaging with your customers, but the mechanics of it are largely the same. So there is an opportunity and something that we're going to be focused on bringing those into a more organic state of a mechanism that people can actually tap into, at a moment's notice and see where things are in the experience and believe that is an authoritative source of truth. I think right now the business co-designed some of this with me. So, a couple years back, they worked hand in hand with myself and other partners to inform what that journey map ultimately look like. So I think there is credibility to it, but in terms of bringing it to a contemporary state, we really do need to prioritize that.
I see this trend in many organizations. What is your take on, like, why is the journey popular again? Why is it gaining traction again? Like, it was a device, a tool, like, was invented in the 90s, and then it was like super popular and then faded away, and now it's coming back in many organizations.
It's coming back. I think there is a recognition that organizations that collaborate and bring different points of view are more successful. And so what's the opposite of that? Silos, very, very distinct, practices that don't understand how their work is impacting, like we were saying before, the upstream, downstream, or even other parts of the organization. And so I think having kind of a common asset that people can rally around is something that people are seeing as a valuable instrument again. I think some of it too evolved out of journey analytics. So in past like 5 years, where a lot of capabilities were in real time demonstrating how customers were navigating the journey, brought together kind of the data science, the data analytics, the business, and the actual real-time customer experience to the forefront. And it felt like something that wasn't static. It's something that is actionable, that you're observing the implications of your day-to-day in. So I think some of that probably laid the groundwork for why journeys are becoming an area of interest again.
Oh, I love that perspective. Maybe that's right. I was
I don't know,
always
just a
thinking
hypothesis.
no. I like it. I was like, after COVID, everyone was basically exposed, but how disorganized we were actually around the customer experience, and therefore we started to like scramble around and build all these wacky whiteboards with like massive journeys to at least stay connected with what mattered, and that didn't scale. And then we figured out like there's different ways. That's at least like something that I've seen happen over and over again. But
you're absolutely right.
The same problem, what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I think you're right, though. I mean, think about the acceleration into the digital space as a result of COVID. Everything moved to digital. And so people who had not been thinking about how do we translate our operations into a digital engagement had nowhere to start. So you're absolutely right. I guarantee that that's probably the catalyst for most of the interest that we're seeing now.
Do you believe an insurance firm can truly organize itself around the customer journey? And I don't mean like there's just one journey. There's obviously many. There's layers of complexity. But like, do you believe that an insurance business can actually organize itself around the customer journey?
So I do. I think that there's ways that I've actually seen it before it was even, I guess, stated as organized around the journey. You've seen ways that bringing together multidisciplinary teams who have an accountability for a segment or a particular phase within a journey. I've seen that model happen in my prior employer. There were those practices in place from a product and underwriting, a service, a digital perspective. Those cohorts would come together and they owned, portions of the experience. And then, and even further back, other insurance companies, they did have journey leads and journey owners. And so I do think it's possible. I don't think it's feasible to do it across the entirety of the journey as one group of people, but I absolutely think that taking kind of that pod approach where you're responsible for, either a segment or one particular journey with a particular segment of customer is absolutely something that I've seen insurance companies do and do it effectively. Mm-hmm.
All around journeys. I have a couple of like fast-paced questions on your best, worst, last and first journey. I always love to ask them. So are you ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. First journey, you remember?
First journey I remember, going to the hospital for stitches. Is that a journey?
Oh, yes, it is. You are the customer.
I was the customer in that case. Yes. It actually was a really good experience. It wasn't even a bad one, but continue.
I love it. When I ask CX professionals about their journeys, like they can be like, I'm the customer here, and in this one I build it. So they go in many directions. Like, yes, okay. So that was the first one. Was it also the worst one? No, it wasn't.
No.
What was the worst?
Was an experience traveling with my parents, my young children, my husband on 4th of July weekend out of the country and being stuck in JFK as a result of endless delays and ultimately a cancellation from the airline, claiming that it was because of bad weather. But upon the pilot and the staff exiting the plane, the pilot shared with us that it was not, in fact, about bad weather. They had timed out. They had been traveling all over the place. And so we ended up sleeping on the floor of JFK with no meals, no recourse, no nothing. So, yeah, that made for a challenging experience for
Oh,
sure.
wow. Did you do
Yep.
anything about it?
Yeah, I ultimately got a lovely credit from the airline, which was, I don't even know what it was worth. I was kind of insulted that we didn't get at least a free ticket. But yeah, and my side passion is writing, notes up to leaders of different companies about how they can improve the experience. So in this case, I had written to the individual who was responsible for CX at the airline and ended up getting credits across the entire family that we could redeem. So I don't think it was enough, but
At least a little bit, like
a little
a
bit,
plaster on the
took the sting
wounds.
out a little bit. Yeah.
Right. So what is, on the contrary, the best customer journey that you've
Best
witnessed or
customer
created?
journey is parenting, right? So, is it the best though? No, it is the best. And I think my children are the customers of this wonderful journey. Um, yeah, talk about like the trials and tribulations. It's definitely not the even keel. It changes every year as they grow older, every new, thing that comes around the corner, but it has been the most interesting, rewarding journey. The
How do
other
you
best
circulate new insights to other relatives?
Quick, just call your mom. They'll tell it.
Right,
They'll tell
right.
everybody everything. That's the
Call
that's
your
the
mom. Old
megaphone.
school. No
Yeah,
AI.
exactly. No, but from like a being a customer, I would say one of the best journeys I had, and this is going to sound so cliche, but this was a long time ago. It was my kid's first trip to Disney, and there was just like these little moments throughout the entire experience that were just so unexpected and lovely. Signing up, telling them that I was going down there with my children. They asked how old my children were, and this was like in the portal. And then, you got this lovely package with their names on it and like a customized, curated suggestion of how you should navigate your experience. And the whole thing was wonderful while we were there. But the cherry on top was I got back home and we had received in the mail this beautiful like lithograph of Walt Disney that was like signed. And it was just this like unnecessary but
Oh,
beautiful
wow.
closure to the experience. And it was really nice.
So
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story. I've been to Disneyland Paris, this one. I don't believe
Hmm.
you were talking about Paris, but last week. So I'm going to
How
check
was
my
that?
mailbox and see if they actually still do that. Like, that would be fun to see.
I went this year again with my kids who are now much older, and my sister has three young children. And I didn't get the lovely little thing at the very end, and I was so
Hmm.
sad. So you see how companies like change and where they index on certain practices. I mean, it was still a lovely experience, but there were nice little things that they would sprinkle throughout back in the day.
Yeah.
So
No. I didn't remember any of those like nice little
yeah,
packages. Like, no, we didn't get
nope,
it. It's a little
all
bit
about
more
the efficiency.
commercialized now.
Yep,
All about
exactly.
efficiency. That's right.
That's right.
So on the last journey, maybe we can talk about what you're working on right now.
Oh goodness, what are we not working on right now? Um, It's interesting because I think going back to kind of the things that we were talking about before of how our team is structured and where we're getting demand. And one of it is how are we, um, and you asked about whether, if I had to do it all over again, would it be a centralized function or not? And our mandate has grown. And that's an awesome testament to the great work that the people are doing. But you always want to make sure your customers remain happy, our customers being our business partners, our customers being our end insureds or our client companies. And that requires capacity and focus. And how do we put in place kind of a strategy to ensure that we're protecting our resources and our capacity so that we can continue to meet the demand of our partners and our customers? And so, with the growth of the team, with the increased mandate, there's a lot of just work being done right now to really ensure that our operational practices are sound and that they'll allow us to continue to be successful. The the other stuff we're working on quite a bit in the innovation space. I can't reveal too much, but a lot of interesting things that are on the horizon that we're exploring. And we are in the throes of really taking meaningful steps to instituting our VOC strategy. So that was something that I actually didn't initially focus on because we really indexed on the primary and secondary research early days. But now there is an appetite, and we've demonstrated in different pockets of the organization the value of having voice of customer and outside-in artifacts and capabilities and things of that nature. So we're shifting to focus on maturing those practices quite a bit.
Wow. People are listening today and want to join your team or want to know more about you. Where can they find you?
So where can they find me? They can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I believe you have the link in the post. And so welcome anybody's inquiries. I would love to connect with other CX practitioners or people who are just interested around our business and how we operate. Always happy to cross-share, insights and best practices.
Thank you. And you have such a lovely way of sharing and 2 decades of experience. So people, please reach out to Angie. Don't bombard her with everything. Thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. This was fun. My first podcast, and I appreciate it.
Oh, wow. You did great. I wouldn't know that this was the first one had I not done my research. But you did wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me here.
It was great connecting with you. Take care.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, an AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.